Let's move to this. Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana has warned that if a national coalition is formed after next year's elections, it will be problematic for economic policy formulation and will likely undermine the efficacy of any budget process. However, the minister says he is confident that South Africans will ultimately vote for stability, namely the ANC. SABC News has spoken to Godongwana about a number of issues, including fixing public finances, the NHI Bill, the new date for the two-pot retirement system, and rumours around his health. A Business News reporter Nompumelelo Siziba asked the minister whether National Treasury was on track to achieving its fiscal consolidation goals.
If you look at all other economies, for instance, Japan's debt to GDP ratio is about 200. No one questions that because the problem, the economy is has got the capacity to service that debt. Our story is a growth one, in the sense that while our interest costs are going up, and the performance of the economy is going in the other direction, and therefore make it a challenge to deal with that fiscal situation. But what we have done, as I'm saying, is that we were trying to do a fiscal consolidation strategy which will make sure that by 25-26 we stabilize, and then thereafter that debt to GDP ratio is going to go down.
But, like you say, the issue of growth continues to elude us. Do you think enough is being done at a structural reform level to help catalyze the growth that we need? Because remember, we also know that even before we had a real crisis in terms of energy and even the logistics situation, the South African economy was still not growing even before those issues became more prominent.
I mean, I normally use 4 issues which we need to tackle, which now we see we're mobilizing everybody and business behind those issues. The first one is the electricity issue. You will see that since 2008 to date, we've been having a stagnant growth. I would argue that there's a correlation between that growth and the performance of the electricity sector. Now we've been joined by the logistics sector, where there's also crime. I must add the state capacity. As we sit, we publish every quarter what is called a Section 32 report, which shows how governments are performing. Already we're seeing a 9 billion rand in the half of the year. We're seeing a 9 billion rand overspending. I don't know how we're going to sustain that moving forward. So your issues, those are the 4 issues in my view that need to be tackled.
And then what about at the municipal level? We know that municipalities are just not doing a good job. In some instances, they're not spending their allocations at all that they need to for infrastructural development and all the rest of it. And this impacts on business confidence and people not wanting to invest in certain areas, job growth, etc.
It talks to the 4th point I raised of capacity issues at that level. And I'm saying capacity at all levels, even at municipalities. Again, even with municipalities, we publish every quarter Section 71 reports, which shows the performance of those municipalities. I would imagine a critical aspect of that is how do we make sure that we can help develop this capacity at all levels.
It does seem quite ironic, Minister, because you talked about partnering with the private sector in order to get things going, to deal with some of the bottlenecks in the economy. But then now you have the NHI, which seems to almost seek to disenfranchise the private sector. We know that the NHI Bill is now in the President's in-tray for signature to pass into law, but many prominent business people, including the likes of Adrian Gore, who's the head of Discovery, has said that the NHI, as things stand, is not going to work without the participation of the private sector. Is this not a concern for you? Because ultimately, you can't have the public sector footing the bill of something that's going to be as costly as the NHI.
Let me just say there's some dishonest in debating this issue. As things stand, as subsidize the rich and the middle class 34 billion rand per annum through their medical aid. Now, when you say the same facilities must be extended for the poor, people are saying it's not affordable. My sense is that what we need to do is to have a rational debate about this thing. And I suggest, though, I suspect even the people like Adrian Gore are not saying don't have NHI. they have got special problems about one particular way of implementing it. I think the general agreement, NHI, has got to be implemented. And therefore, we cannot afford to subsidize the rich and the middle class, but we can't subsidize the poor.
Doesn't it make sense to fine-tune the inadequacies of the system before it's passed into law? Because once it's passed into law, it becomes more problematic.
Let me just say, once it's passed into law, it doesn't mean you'll have NHI on that day. What it does mean, you have got a framework within which you can implement it over a time period which government will have to craft.
Why give Transnet a guarantee as opposed to a capital injection? I mean, you've been more than generous to Eskom, and surely Transnet is equally important as Eskom. Why?
Even Eskom, it has taken a while to arrive at that decision. As things stand, we are looking into the numbers, how Transnet is going to perform in terms of their numbers. We're engaging them with that. What we've done is to say between now and March, to give them a breathing space, we need to give them this guarantee while we are looking at the broader financial numbers of Transnet.
So we got learned that the two-pot retirement system is now going to come into effect in September 2024, and that's after you had some discussions with the finance committee around instituting it at a later date to accommodate the private sector. Are you satisfied with the outcome, and do you think that the retirement fund industry should be able to have all its ducks in a row for that date?
Let me just give an indication that if you are going to pay this amount of money to people who are going to place it in people's system, it's a huge amount. First, it has got tax implication, and therefore SARS has got to be ready to be able to execute that. They are amending their system. The second thing, the biggest pension fund in the country, the government pension fund, originally was not meant to be part of this two-pot system. After a long debate with the unions, we have now brought in the biggest pension fund, the government pension fund, into the system so that also public service employees must also benefit in that. They are not also ready with their systems. So what we have done is to say, okay, everybody has got to put their systems in place. Come 1st of September, everybody must get his money.
So next year is an election year, and it is said generally by analysts that particularly in developing nations, the Treasury tends to relax a little bit with the spending reins during an election year because of pressures. What's your response to that, since you've always been banging on about fiscal consolidation?
Let me just say the budget I'm going to table on the 21st of February next year will not have an impact on the elections. So for us, the budget will not be influenced by that outcome, because it can be too late to influence any electoral outcomes. It's going to be a budget as normal.
Minister, one of the things that's quite important for South Africa, we're a very small part of the global economy, but one of the things that's important for us is our trading relations and so on and so forth. We know that the geopolitical environment currently is very unsteady. And of course, there was a lot of reaction when we learned that Petro SA has partnered with Gazprom Bank as an investment partner to get their Mosul Bay refinery going again. There are concerns that, of course, anybody who's associated with Russia these days may be open to sanctions. There are concerns that South Africa could, fall foul in that regard. How concerned are you around how South Africa positions itself and with whom it associates with, such that we don't, the gains that we get from those partnerships are not minuscule relative to the losses that we can have if people decide to withdraw because sentiment says that we're doing the wrong thing?
Let me just say, first and foremost, I accept that because of our colonial past, our economy is too embedded to the Western world. And as a result, our most trade is with the Western world. But there's nothing that prevents us from trading with anybody. What the Americans will take action on is if we are doing a business with a company which is sanctioned by them. As far as I know, Graskop is not part of the sanction list, and therefore I don't see any problem in that relationship.
Minister, assuming that you are the finance minister next year after the election, but we have a coalition type of setup at the national level, what do you anticipate that will look like from a policy point of view? Because we seem to have been getting, we've always had good policies, but the implementation thereof has always been problematic. Isn't there a concern that should that day come where you have to work with others who have a different ideology to yourself, that might slow the pace of reform that we're seeing already?
I'm praying. For now, I'm working on the assumption that the ANC is going to win. Any coalition, we've seen it in the municipality, is a disaster, create instability. We can't afford to have a president every 6 months. That does not work. So I think South Africans will vote for stability in this country. That's my prayer for now. We'll vote for stability. But let's assume that happens, your assumption. It's going to be a problem because budget is about informed by your policy choices as a government. Now, if you've got a conglomeration of people who are going to sit around, discuss different policy statements, it's going to undermine the efficacy of the budget process.
One last thing, Minister. There've been rumours about your health, that you're not well and all of that. You look as fit as a fiddle to me. But can you just, be open with us to tell us, are you okay?
I'm okay. You know what happens is that after the medium-term budget policy statement, I wanted to take leave for a couple of days, but I combined that with a normal checkup. And then people all of a sudden that I'm not well. I'm fit as a fiddle, as you say. I'm right up. I've been to the G20 compact with Africa in Berlin after that. So I'm up and running. I'm ready.
Up and running and ready. Now that you mention global meetings, one last thing, COP28. Are you satisfied with the outcomes that have come from there? Because it seems as though every year there's a lack of meeting of minds around the way forward to deal with the issue of climate change.
There will be, and I've not fully understood, I didn't go even attend it, but the normal division is, I would characterize it by somebody who said, kicking away the ladder. The developed world developed their economies by polluting the world, the planet. They are then saying, please don't pollute, don't do what we did, we're kicking away this ladder, don't do what we did. And they are also not prepared to compensate us for that loss. So that's a debate that has always been in this discussion of climate change.
Quite straightforward there with Nompu.